Hello, beautiful. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Today on the podcast, I want to talk to you about some IRS news and benefits that are available to you when you suffer a casualty loss. So that certainly can include a disaster. And I'm going to focus mainly on federally declared disasters in this episode. But I want to speak to those of you who are not in a disaster situation like I am here in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been really thinking about climate change, of course, and this hurricane that just hit the place that I live and wiped out my studio, 20 years of my work. This a disaster at this scale, this unprecedented scale that none of us were prepared for because we were used to 20-year floods. We just got a 500-year flood. Climate change means storms are getting worse. Events like the one I just experienced are going to become more common in the places where you live. And of course, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but of course, it's a huge part of the life that I'm living at this moment. And I want to be there for you, for future you, in case this does happen to you, or in case you have recently been through a natural disaster, such as wildfires in California, or, other extreme tornadoes or power outages in Texas. I mean, you can probably name 5 different recent events that are pretty clear evidence that storms and disaster events have become worse, more severe than normal or than previously normal. So what I want to do for you today is not so much focus on the tragedy aspect. I think we're all getting a little sick of that. But I want to create an episode that's kind of a clearinghouse. So I'm not going to get into total detail on every aspect here, but what I want to do is outline what the IRS, what their most recent press release says about disaster tax relief here for affected people in North Carolina due to Hurricane Helene. But this also applies to you if you have been in a federally declared disaster area. And many of you outside of North Carolina have been affected and are still under the statute of limitations where you could file an amended tax return and get money back for your casualty losses. Also, and I certainly don't wish this on anyone, we're not even done with hurricane season right now. I don't know when wildfire season is because I live in a temperate rainforest. But if you're in a wildfire affected place, this may be true for you. And of course, there are places like Boston where I grew up that's having weird weather events and more extreme weather, even though it's not a place that typically gets super crazy weather, I suppose, aside from blizzards. So I want you to just bookmark and save this episode. Also, if you are a person who serves creative people, if you have an audience and you have a resources page, you are welcome to take the link, copy the link for this podcast and put it into that resources page. I'm really happy to provide these resources for free for anybody who is affected. And I just, if you have suffered a disaster casualty loss the way we here in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, just recently have and are still very much dealing with, I want you to be able to access this information as fast as possible because it's really important for your survival. All right. So with that said, I do think that even if you are not in a disaster affected area, I'm going to try to keep this episode short and snappy and really be more like an index for you so that you know kind of what benefits to look for if you are affected by a disaster. All right. And of course, if you have friends in Western North Carolina, North Georgia, East Tennessee who are affected, or Florida who have been affected, or in any other region that's been recently affected by a federally declared disaster, absolutely, of course, and please share this episode with them as well. All right. So with all of that said, let's just jump right in. All right. So the IRS has a press release from about October 1st, and they basically extended coverage for FEMA created, declared a federally declared disaster. This is an important designation for your taxes. It opens up new benefits. So what I want everyone here to understand is that when you suffer a loss, in tax world, we call these casualty losses. So when you suffer a loss of your personal property or your business property, you're entitled often to a casualty loss. But there are some big distinctions between whether it is, a random act that only affected you or maybe a very small community versus when it is a large event that has the designation of a federally declared disaster. Essentially, the federally declared version opens up a bunch of options for you. So, of course, it's not good. It means, by definition, it means things are really bad, but it does give you a lot more options and relief on the tax side. Okay. So the IRS just recently announced that anyone in the state of North Carolina who was affected by Hurricane Helene is automatically qualified to use these benefits of the federal disaster declaration, okay, for casualty losses. So if you're in North Carolina and you were affected in any way, suffered any losses from Hurricane Helene, you are automatically in the scope, okay? Now, a lot of people might have been affected by the disaster, but you file taxes with an address that is nowhere close to it. This is absolutely possible. Maybe you work in Oklahoma or California, but you own a business property here in North Carolina that was affected, right? This is possible. So if that is true, what I want you to understand, I'm going to read you a little piece from the IRS. It says this: the IRS automatically identifies taxpayers located in the covered disaster area and applies filing and payment relief. Isn't that nice? But affected taxpayers who reside or have a business located outside the covered disaster area should call the IRS disaster hotline. I'm going to give you the number here, so take notes, at 866-562-5227 to request this tax relief. In other words, if you are affected by this disaster, you can call that hotline and you can get disaster relief applied to you, okay? I'll repeat that number one more time. It's 866-562-5227, okay? All right. So I want to touch really quickly on casualty losses. I hope to do some future episodes and put together a little course that I will, of course, make available to all of you for free on casualty losses. But I'm having a little bit of a struggle with how to make these clear enough to a layperson, because to be totally honest, casualty losses are pretty complex and there's a lot of if-then scenarios involved. And so I'm really struggling with how to simplify the information enough to make it possible to convey on a podcast or even in a course that has a written outline. So stay tuned for that. I am working on it. But just FYI, there are a lot of little tiny rules. And just as a preview, I am in the show notes of today's episode. You will find a big chunk of resources for finding help filing your tax return for free. And these might be your best option for claiming all of the correct casualty losses that you are eligible for, okay? So sometimes the answer in taxes is you need help. So I'm going to put that help in the show notes today, and you are welcome to avail yourself of any of it, all right? Okay, but a quick touch on casualty losses. So for the year of the disaster itself or the prior year, this is very counterintuitive. So note that we're talking about going back into the past. For the year of the disaster or the prior year through an amended tax return, you can take a casualty loss. Now, the reason that you are allowed to go to last year's tax return, a year that was not affected by a disaster, file an amended return for it and change the amount of income you made retroactively because of this, accounting for a big loss of personal or business property. The purpose of that, doing this through an amended return, is that it gets you the money faster, okay? That is the reason to file an amended return for a casualty loss. The IRS also gives you the option of choosing whether you'll do it this tax year or the prior tax year, because you get to choose that way which one gives you the bigger tax benefit. You're probably noticing as I say that this is going to require you doing the numbers for 2 different tax years. And while, of course, that is not simple and easy to do, it's definitely to your benefit, but you just might need some help. Okay. So again, I want to point you to my show notes today where you can get, where I have a bunch of resources for places to get free income tax preparation help. And of course, if you have a trusted, beloved tax preparer who you work with, when you pay someone to do your taxes, it becomes their job to get you these benefits. And of course, you need to highlight for them that you are really concerned about this, and this is a big part of your taxes this year. Okay. All right. So the purpose of filing an amended return for a casualty loss is effectively to retroactively claim that loss so that you get a big refund check in the mail. The point there is to get you money. Okay. And the point is also to get you money now or as quickly as your amended return can be processed versus having to wait until next year's tax deadline and file the new tax return and then wait for, that to get processed, right? When you have a disaster, you need money pretty immediately. And so this just helps speed up that timeline, which is a really good thing. Okay. So you can deduct personal property losses that are not covered by your insurance or other reimbursements. That's the purpose of this program, right? Anything that you lost and you didn't get reimbursed, so in other words, that remains lost, that is essentially the amount that you are allowed to deduct on your taxes. There are a few more wrinkles there, can be a little more complicated, so that is not the complete story, and I want you to be aware of that. But that's what you do. If you happen to be affected by a different disaster declaration, you can go to the IRS website and look up the declaration number. That's very important. You need to put the disaster number onto your tax return because these federally declared disaster benefits only apply if you're in a federally declared disaster zone. So if you are a victim of Hurricane Helene, this is the FEMA declaration number, okay? It is 3617-EM. Okay, so that's M as in Moxie, all right? Okay, 3617-EM, and you put that on the top of your form, and that will help you, be eligible, okay? So, of course, if it's not Hurricane Helene, if it's a wildfire, a different hurricane, tornadoes, you name it, you will have to go, what you'll want to do is go to the IRS website and just look up the disaster number, okay? All right. Now, another benefit that you get because of a federally declared disaster is you get an extension of some of your deadlines. So for Helene, if you had a valid tax extension already, in other words, if you didn't file your tax return by April, you got a valid tax extension, which extends your time to file for 6 months to October 15th. October 15th was probably some pretty rough timing since this storm came down late September and into early October. You didn't even have internet or power, right? So no one was the last thing on anyone's mind was filing your amended return. Filing your tax extension. So now if you had a valid extension, you now have until May 1st, 2025, okay? I want you to note that if you had a tax extension, your taxes were already due April 15th. And so that payment deadline has not been extended because you're already late. You're just more late. So sorry for that one. But I know on this podcast, I talk about the difference between an extension of time to file, which you get, and an extension of time to pay, which you never get. So just be careful. The IRS means business on that rule in general, and certainly here as well. Okay. The May 1st deadline applies to any payment normally due during this period between the declared date, September 25th, and May 1st of 2025. And so that includes your estimated tax payments for January 15th and April 15th of 2025. So if you are a person affected by Helene, that means those two last estimated quarterly tax, the last one of 2024 and the first one of 2025, get an automatic extension until May 1st. Okay. Now, if your business is humming along and you're still making money, congrats, and that's awesome. You should still make the payment if you can, because you'll owe the tax, right? But if you are in, that terrible position where your income has been dramatically impacted, this deadline extension will be really helpful for you, because what it allows you to do is get your taxes prepared for that new, for the April 15th / May 1st deadline, and then see how much that reduction in your income for the year affects those last two recent estimated quarterly tax payments. Presumably the amount you owe for those will be a lot less than the ones you made earlier in the year. And so you may not really have much of a payment to make in the first place. Okay. So this is a really nice gift to you / us. I will include myself because I am definitely in this boat. Okay. Another benefit that you get when you're in a federally declared disaster zone is that the IRS waives its fees for copies of your previously filed tax returns. So if you are one of, in that incredibly heartbreaking situation where your records were lost, if your whole house was destroyed, or your filing cabinet where you keep your tax returns was in the basement and that flooded, the IRS waives its fees on getting copies of your old tax returns. Normally you can get these, but you have to pay a fee because you as a taxpayer are meant to be keeping copies of your own tax returns. But in this instance, the point of this rule is your records may have been destroyed, so you can get free copies. So to do that, you want to just put the assigned FEMA declaration number on the top of the form requesting the copies. Just FYI, I don't like to use a lot of numbers in my podcast because I find them very non-memorable, but just FYI, the form to request a copy of your tax return is called Form 4506, and you're going to put the Hurricane Helene declaration, FEMA declaration number right at the top of that form. And that will automatically make you eligible for no fee. Okay. So again, that declaration number is 3617-EM. That is the Hurricane Helene declaration number. Okay. Next, qualified disaster relief payments are excluded from your taxable income. Oh, isn't that nice? I don't know if you have been worried about, the FEMA money that you have gotten. Many of us, and if you're affected by Helene, I really hope that you have applied for aid from FEMA. You are almost certainly eligible for it. And even if you were denied initially, if you call the FEMA number, they are reversing those denials almost across the board. So it's very worth your time. I also want to just say that if you, it's really important, not just for you to apply for FEMA aid, it's actually important for the recovery of our community at large. The reason is there are, the government kind of makes an assessment of how broad the impact of the disaster was by the number of FEMA applications. So your application itself is really important, all right? If you are like me and you feel like, well, my business is still functional, I don't want to take money that should be going to somebody else, it really is still important that you apply for that money and get it. And if you want to, you can do what I plan to do, which is to just donate the money right back to relief efforts, okay? That's fine. Believe me, if you're in this area, you know that we need the money and we should make sure that it's coming. All right. So those FEMA payments, for example, are not taxable. So go ahead, use it on the things that you need to use it for, and you do not need to worry about reporting it on your tax return because it is not taxable income. Phew, right? All right. Now, it's not just those FEMA payments that are excludable from your taxable income. Any other qualified disaster relief payment that is from a government agency is also excludable. So maybe you're on DSNAP, the disaster, food stamps benefit, or, other disaster relief from a government agency. It could be federal, could be state, could be municipal, whatever. All right. Last week's episode I did on mutual aid. I know so many of you lovely, generous humans do a lot of mutual aid work, and I think it's amazing. And so just a reminder here about the taxability of mutual aid. If you receive mutual aid because you are affected, if that money is given to you as a gift, in other words, if there's no exchange that happens, and if that person can confirm for you, preferably in writing, that it's given as a gift, gifts are not taxable income. So that is a wonderful thing about receiving mutual aid. As long as it is given as a gift without any exchange, then it is also not reportable as tax. So that is also, I hope, a relief to you. All right. Another benefit that you get in a federal declared disaster zone is there's no penalty if you need to take money out, if you need to take an early distribution of your retirement plan or your IRA. Okay. So, if you lost everything and the only money if you have a little chunk of money in your retirement and you need to get it out, of course, we don't prefer to do this in life. We would rather not touch that money. But this is one of those scenarios where you might need to, and the IRS waives the 10% penalty on early distributions if you access that money because of a disaster. All right. Now, each different type of plan has its own rules. And so you're going to need to, if you have a Roth IRA, you want to go look up the Roth IRA early distribution rules specifically. Same if it's a traditional IRA, a SEP IRA, a 401k, solo 401k, or, through a big workplace plan or a 403b. Okay. So pick the kind of plan you have and go Google around or, get on the Fidelity website and look up the rules for that specific type of account. Okay. But in general, for all of those accounts, that fee should be waived. There may be additional rules as well for replenishing the funds, because of course, that's kind of the goal. We want you to, yes, take out the cash because you need it immediately because you're in a disaster, but hopefully a couple years down the line when you've recovered, if you have extra money that you want to put away again back and replenish those retirement accounts, there are some additional rules depending on which type of retirement account you have that allow you to replenish extra money into the account also without penalty. So in other words, have an expanded amount of money that you can put in later after a disaster early distribution. Okay. So you just want to check the rules for the type of plan that you have. Okay. All right. That's all that I have for you today. I know this topic can feel a little bit overwhelming, so I was hoping to not go into too much detail on each thing, but rather just give you kind of an overview of benefits that you get when you are suffering from a federally declared disaster. Don't forget that in the show notes today, I'm putting a whole bunch of different free tax return options for you. And so casualty losses are honestly a little bit complex. And so it really may be a time that you want to get help with your tax return this year. And I know it's also a year that you would rather not have to pay for that. Okay. So I know that, and I'm putting a whole bunch of resources for free tax preparation help in the show notes today. All right. So I really hope that this episode just helps you get an overview of benefits available to you if you are suffering from a federally declared disaster. Absolutely, please forward this episode to a friend who is affected by Helene or another recent disaster. A lot of this stuff applies retroactively and for a while. So, if your friend suffered a year ago, there may be benefits they can still take advantage of. And you are absolutely welcome to copy the link to this episode and put it on your resources page for your organization for, artists, creatives, healers of the future who, may one day also have a dramatic weather event. None of us knew that it was coming before it came here in North Carolina. And I would suspect that for most of you who may get hit in the future, you also don't know it's coming. So feel free to share this episode at any time and save it now so it'll be easy for you to access. All right. I hope you all hug your loved ones, stay safe. Thank you so much to all of you who have contributed to the mutual aid fund that I have put out. I will put my donation links in the show notes for those of you feeling a swell of generosity and want to continue to support this region of Western North Carolina. Of course, that's not necessary, but if you feel moved to do so, we are very grateful. All right. Love to all of you. Stay safe. Be well. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm so grateful for that. This video is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.